Conversations with the 100. My name is Milton Harris, serve as the Executive Director, 100 Black Men of San Antonio. Got a great segment tonight with the wonderful speaker. We're gonna be having a discussion on critical race theory. Well, a little bit about the 100 Black Men here in San Antonio. We've been a part of the community since 1999. We do a lot of great work around mentorship, leadership development. We focus on brotherhood, service through mentorship. And so we are looking to grow our ranks. So if you are a professional man, a good man out there in the San Antonio community looking to engage youth and other members of our community, please give us a shout out. We'd love to talk to you about becoming a member of the organization. Our guest tonight is Dr. Marlon C. James, Assistant Professor, Multicultural Education, Texas A&M University. Professor, he's specializing in urban and multicultural education at Texas A&M University and is a faculty research fellow for the Center for Applied Research and Statistics at Prairie View A&M University. In his time at Texas A&M, Dr. James has served as the Executive Director of the Center for Urban School Partnerships, the Program Chair for Urban Education, and the Chair of the Carter and Lark Lecture Series for Black History in Education. Dr. James is president and chief educational consultant of the educational consulting firm, the Equality and Equity Group, LLC. Over 2 decades, Dr. James has provided training and curriculum for promoting systemic equity in education and instructional equity in classrooms. His research is read around the globe and focuses on promoting optimal development among young Black men in urban schools, instructional reform, and ending the impacts of racism in public schools and in higher education institutions. So we are so excited to have Dr. James with us here on this evening to talk about this spicy hot topic called critical race theory. What is it? What's the history of it? Why is there such a buzz? Why is it such a hot political, object? I think it would just benefit us as a community to become better educated on what this really is. And so Dr. James, welcome to the show. I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you to the 100 from Black Men of San Antonio for having us. Thank you to AAN TV for broadcasting. Thank you for everyone taking time out of your busy schedules this evening to join us. And Brother Harris and I, we spoke some time ago at the last conversation with the 100. And, he asked me then to come back and do a kind of a prolonged dialogue about critical race theory. What we do know, let's start with a question, because we have a lot to get into tonight. I want to just start with a question for you all. Besides Donna, because I know Donna, she's a educational guru and all that good stuff. I wanted to ask you all, what have you heard about critical race theory? What have you heard about critical race theory in the general public? And then what are your concerns about it?
And I know for me, and folks that are on the call, you're welcome to chime in, come off mute and chime in and engage with Dr. James. But I know I've heard that it's a tool used to teach kids in K through 12 that all white people are racist. Okay. And that that's why politicians are banning it in schools across Texas.
All right. Thumbs up if you, or emoji thumbs up if you heard that kind of line of reasoning as well. Well, some people are not Zoom familiar. Oh, we got a few thumbs up. What else? What else have you heard? And I guess what concerns you about critical race theory?
I've heard that it's kind of an attempt to erase some of the truths about our history and the history of this country so that we are less inclined to do and think certain things about ourselves.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? We had a couple of people talking simultaneously.
one of the things that we know for sure is that when some people, and specifically in the current political winds that are blowing, they really don't know what critical race theory is. They don't know the definitions. They don't know the tenets, and what they think it is, it's not. And so one of the things I talk about is it's asking us to critically think about race and racism, particularly systemic racism in education. And so that's one of the things that I do realize is that when you ask people point blank, well, what is it? They don't really know, but they know they're against it.
That's right. So two of the major things we're faced with as people of color in America, and I'm grateful for Donald for raising these issues, is the issue of race and then the issue of racism, okay? They're both connected to critical race theory. Our hope tonight is that we clarify beyond a shadow of a doubt what critical race theory is and what it is not, and what it's used for and what it cannot be used for. But also, my hope is that we can have time to discuss, as Brother Harris and I discussed the other day, a urgent issue that requires our attention that's related to this conversation. But we know that the idea of race has not always existed in human consciousness. It's a fairly new concept. It started in the 1490s, where the colonial push out of Europe was happening, and Portugal wanted to invade Northern Africa. And so King Alphonse sought permission from the Pope to initiate enslavement, confiscation of property, confiscation of goods, and reducing the personhood of human beings to perpetual slavery. That was actually in the document, that last phrase, reduce their personhoods to perpetual slavery. The idea of race came in because they had to justify what they were doing. And they developed this idea that God created only one race of people, the European race. They called them the super race, and they were the only group that had souls. Therefore, the 10 Commandments only applied to them, and the 10 Commandments did not apply to people who were not considered humans. Therefore, you can steal, you can kill, you can do anything to those people because they're more like cattle and not like human beings. And the idea of racial hierarchies were introduced when you had terms like Caucasian, Mongoloid, Negro introduced in the 1600s in Europe. And those ideas found their way here to America. They were used to write many of virtually all of our slave codes and slave procedures designed to enslave people were enacted out of this belief system that God created one race of people, or humans evolved and Africans de-evolved. If you want to get some interest in reading, Google terms monogenesis and polygenesis. And this idea of race, that the human family can be separated into 5 or 7 groups, and these 5 or 7 groups can be ranked from superior to inferior, from human to subhuman, from intelligent to unintelligent, from trustworthy to untrustworthy. And those rankings are permanently fixed, either by God or by nature. That's the idea of race. Linked to the idea of race, well, we know now because of the Human Genome Project that human beings are 99.9% genetically exactly the same. There's no different races. There's only one human race. race, the idea of race was designed to divide and oppress human beings. That's the only thing it was used for. Racism then is a system designed to legalize and operationalize ideas of innate racial inferiority and superiority, and then link the privileges within society to your racial category, and then create systems to protect those benefits called discrimination. The late great Asa Hilliard said, race isn't real, but racism is, right? Now, to our discussion of critical race theory. Critical race theory has become, since the 80s, when critical legal studies was introduced in the United States, and in the early 90s, critical race theory was introduced into education, it has become a way of thinking that helps us to expose when race is being used to affect the opportunities of children and people, and or when racism has been organized to generate mass oppression. Critical race theory is one of the key frameworks for helping to expose and end racism in the daily lives of Americans. That's what it is. Part of the reason why it's opposed with such fervor is because its mission and purpose, as stated by the founding authors, is to expose and eradicate racism in all forms. It's critical of race. The idea that humans can be ranked from inferior to superior, and then systems created to support that, is critical of race, right? And so that's one of the first things that we want to get across today, is that critical race theory is not what people have been telling us in the media. Critical race theory contains within it the power to end racism. And this is why it's being opposed. There's no other reason. Besides, as well, people saw this opposition against critical race theory as a way of conservatives recapturing the state houses and the White House again. So this is a political strategy designed by a gentleman named Rufo out of Seattle during COVID. He had lost a local city council. He ran for local city council and got into it with the educators, I believe, and lost miserably because of that. He's sitting at home trying to figure out what he's going. A former Trump advisor. He's sitting at home trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life, political life, and some of his white male friends are sending him messages about all this diversity training that they're taking at in their jobs. And he began to ask questions about what's common in these trainings. And he found that critical race theory was one of the undercurrents in all of those trainings, which is not, by the way, it's not, or it should not be. And I'm gonna explain to you why it shouldn't be. Again, my name is Dr. Marlon James. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. But let's get into this in a little bit more detail. There are different educational frameworks. We have a curriculum framework, which tells us what content to cover with children, in what order to cover that content, and how do we best measure that children have learned the content. That's your curriculum framework. Your pedagogical framework tells you how best to teach the content to children. But there's another framework called research frameworks. And research frameworks helps us to understand how to find out information that we don't know. Critical race theory is part of that third framework. It's a research framework. It's designed to help guide us as researchers to understand issues of race and racism and how it's impacting our lives. It is not a pedagogical framework because we don't use it to teach in schools. And it's not a curriculum framework because we don't use it to organize what kids ought to learn in schools, right? In order for it to be a pedagogical framework or curriculum framework, critical race theory would have to be approved by some state board of education. And to my knowledge, no state board of education across the country has approved critical race theory being taught or being used in K-12 schools. It doesn't exist. It's a figment of conservative imagination to say that critical race theory is being used in schools. It's impossible. And this comes from a person who I've published more than 20 articles using critical race theory. So I'm an advocate for critical race theory, but I'm saying to you that it is not a curriculum framework and it's not a pedagogical framework. How do we know this? Because the researchers, Gloria Ladson-Billings and Tate, and any number of other researchers who brought critical race theory into education at the exact same time created pedagogical frameworks for teachers because they were former classroom teachers. Those pedagogical frameworks are called culturally responsive teaching, culturally sustaining teaching, equity pedagogy, multicultural education. Those have been approved by most states to be used in classrooms. And so there's no need to use critical race theory in classrooms because former teachers who became professors created culturally responsive ways of teaching that are appropriate to use in classrooms. All right. So I wanted to help drive this point home. The other day, I was driving my son to a military base in Central Texas because he had to take some tests for the military. And the day before, we had worked on the brake system for our trusted Chrysler Town and Country minivan. And we worked on the back brakes and got it all together. And I'm dropping him off, and the brake light flashes on. And immediately I start going through my mind, man, did we put brake fluid in? Did we flush the brakes properly? Did we put the brake pads on? I'm kind of going through all these scenarios in my mind as I'm pulling over off the highway. And so I open up the hood and looked in the hood, looked all over the undercarriage to see if there was any leaks, anything like that, and determined that the brake cap wasn't tight enough. So some of the brake fluid was escaping, and it had forced the lever lower. And so it caused the indicator light, the warning light, brake light to come on. And immediately I did what anyone should do when they see a light come on their dashboard, is they pulled over and I conducted an investigation. All right. I'm proposing to us that critical race theory is like a set of warning lights in your car. It prompts you to conduct a more thorough investigation, but it's targeted because just like your warning lights on your car, they just don't flash randomly. They flash when there's a specific problem with a specific system within your car. So you get a check engine light when there's something going on with your engine. You get a gas cap light when there's something going on with your gas cap. You get a seatbelt light flashing when your front seatbelts are not fastened, etc. Critical race theory is very similar to a set of warning lights, because when we're trying to understand race and racism, particularly within our public school system, researchers have offered us 5 warning indicators. And we're not looking at the entire educational system in the entire event of racism that has plagued human existence for 500 years. We're looking at 5 very specific areas. Just like the brake light came on, I didn't go look at the windshield wipers. It was a brake light, right? And so that let me know that there was a specific system that I had to investigate. Critical race theory, like all research frameworks, allows researchers to narrow their topic. So they're not looking at all of human existence, but just very specific things. In most research frameworks, gives you maybe 3 to 5 things to take a look at when you're trying to understand any system. For critical race theory in education, there's typically 5 indicators used by researchers that now have been used since 1994 to produce over 1,500 research articles about race and racism in public schools toward the goal of ending racism in schools. Okay, now let me say this. Critical race theory was created by people of color. And when you analyze those 1,500 articles, what you find is that it was invented by people of color to understand the experiences of people of color from the perspectives of people of color. Critical race theory is not appropriate to analyze the experiences of white Americans. It's not appropriate for analyzing how to help white Americans in their own individual affiliation with racism. There are other research frameworks that are designed to help white people understand whiteness and how to undo white racism. Critical race theory is not that. So when people make the claims that critical race theory is used in schools to help to try to tell white kids that they're all racist, that is completely illogical because it was not even created to understand white experiences. In fact, when you do an analysis of those 1,500 articles, what you find is less than, not even 0.5% of the research terms used in those 1,500 articles deal with white racism, with white supremacy. Not even 0.5%. Understanding white racism is not a research interest necessarily of critical race theorists, because we want to understand the experiences that people of color are having with racism, because it is their experiences that are essential for us solving and ending racism. All right? Let me pause here and just ask y'all for any questions. I know I've given you a lot, so what questions do you have now? Is it a little clearer about the purpose of critical race theory? What it was designed for and what it's not designed for? A little bit clearer, yes?
Yeah, for me, certainly. It's interesting when you say this is for people of color, designed by people of color. But it seems like the people that are opposed to critical race theory want to make it all about white people.
It has nothing to do with them.
And you're attacking white people, you're making white people feel bad. You're saying that all white people are racist and that America is inherently racist. And so it's just interesting, you know, in your comments, you mentioned that it was designed for people of color. And I think I can't recall the exact terminology you used, but it's designed to make us more aware and improve our IQ and intellect around race.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so perhaps there are proponents still out there that don't want that to happen.
Yeah. So there's an audience question that asked the question, why is the definition starting to change? There's this great book, I believe it's entitled 1984, which was written back in the early 1900s, that created a society based upon the alternative reality that Germany had won World War II. And the author painted the picture of what a society would look like if Germany had indeed won. One of the things that they noted, and this is to answer the question that the audience provided, was that society was built around changing definitions in events to mean just the opposite of what they actually meant. and it was a way of mind control. This book is actually banned. 1984 is banned. It's one of the banned books. But I see why it was banned, because it makes you think very, very critical about how states operate. And so part of the reason why the definition is changing is because it serves a political purpose now. You have a group of politicians that really, this anti-critical race theory movement came out of the Trump loss of the White House and efforts to try to figure out how to get back into the White House and how to get conservatives back into state houses, into local school boards. So the definition is they're trying to change the definition because it serves a purpose for igniting white racial rage. I'm gonna say that one more time. The changing the definition of critical race theory is purposeful for political intentions. And what they have determined is that if you can ignite white racial rage, they will come and vote more. And it's working. Around the country is working. And so this is why they're trying to change the definition. But I want people to hear clearly, they're not changing the definition. They just want you to believe that the definition is changing. That's the mind work that's happening here. And they want you to believe that something's happening that is literally almost impossible to happen. It is almost impossible for the average teacher to teach using critical race theory. Number one, because they're not taught it during teacher preparation. They're just not taught it. They don't know it. They typically don't know critical race theory until they're doing the PhD program and they take a course on racism in education. And most PhDs never ever do that. Maybe 2% of all PhDs take courses that have critical race theory in it. So very few Americans actually know what critical race theory is, but guess what? That's what made it vulnerable, because the general population don't know what it is in the name itself. For example, if I gave a poll and I say, are you for or against intercultural education? Most of us be like, that sounds okay. If I say, hey, are you for or against multicultural education? Folks be like, yeah, that's okay. If I ask you, are you for or against urban education? People are like, that's not bad. But if I say, are you for or against critical race theory? That sounds kind of weird. All right, critical, nobody like nothing critical. Nobody like talking about race in America. And then theory, the word theory brings up conspiracy theory. So now we're going to be critical, we got race, and we got a conspiracy theory, right? That's how. So this is what was happening in the minds of average Americans. They were introduced to this concept and they called it, the people who did this called it the boogeyman. Because it was the one concept that they can use to scare the heck out of people. And they're playing on racial fear. And this is why it's such a powerful, unfortunately, a powerful tool. And then another audience member asked, what can be done to clear up the confusion? Hats off to the 100. These are the type of conversations we need to have to clear up the confusion. This discussion we're having helps to provide some degree of clarity on these issues, and the PowerPoint I provided can be shared openly and freely. So now that we know, it's on us to have conversations with our grandmoms and our mothers and our wives and husbands and children and teachers, etc. It's on us now to spread the word. But the only way that the confusion can be cleared up is through the truth telling, through truth telling. Now, I'm gonna say this: truth and democracy have to be married together. When you start marrying yourself to lies, you start undoing democracy too. And so this is a battle that we cannot just give up on. We have to educate. We have to educate. We have to educate. We have to educate. Any additional questions or comments before we move on?
Yes, Doctor, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Charles Ward, when it comes to the media and the use of the term critical race theory, and it not having, when it's introduced, not having any real definition attached to it, how can the media do a better service with ensuring that when subject matter or content is delivered and critical race theory is mentioned, how can they do a better job of prepping their consumer with understanding what critical race theory really is? Because if the first time that they hear critical race theory and there is no definition behind it, at that point, all bets are off with regard to really understanding what it is. And at some point it gets weaponized or whatever the case may be for the person that wants to do whatever their biddings are with it. But back to my original, how can the media do a better job? Or what should we expect from the media,
Right.
or demand from the media in terms of staging it, I guess, a lot better than they currently do?
Great question, Brother Ward. The thing is, God always has remnants. You know what I mean? Sometimes we think we're in the battle by ourselves, but no, God uses other people too, right? There's a sister out in San Antonio named Robin, and she works for Fox News. She has been single-handedly going out and just conducting just really good reporting on this critical race theory debacle, if you will. Her work provides clear definitions. She's bringing brothers and sisters who are knowledgeable onto TVs to do interviews. So one of the things we can do is share the sources that are doing it right? So this sister Robin, she's Fox News. She's local to you all. Get on YouTube, get on Instagram, follow her, share her work, repeat her work, because the challenge, Brother Ward, is, as we all know, is that this is insanely political, and there are some news industries that feel that they have a vested interest in keeping the conversation about critical race theory exactly the way it is, because controversy breeds higher ratings, right? So it's on us as citizens, when we find good content, to share that content, to promote that content, to send Sister Robin just a note and say, hey, thank you. I think you're doing good work. And there's many other reporters out there who are doing good work, who just need encouragement, and they need people to use our network to get them stories and get them access to experts and get them access to community members who have the right thinking on this issue. So we have to rally around the individuals who are doing the good work, and there's many of them out there who are willing to tell the truth. Any other comments?
Yes, sir. This is Nolan Anderson. I do have a question based on your comment about CRT is being politicized. That appears to be where the problem is. From my understanding, the CRT really started at higher education. And now the politicians have very strategically moved it from the higher education into public education from K to 12. And in communities where you have these respective independent school district trustee boards, particularly in a predominantly white school district, that's where the deception is further exaggerated. And most of us, I see the names and possibility are involved with the public education system. The higher education arena apparently handled it pretty well until it got in the hands of the politicians. There needs to be a strategy in some kind of way to redirect their impact in the community where we have staunch conservatives. And right now we have 26 states that are definitely trying to force through lies and very strategic. This didn't just happen yesterday. How can we, when I say we, if we created this theory and came up with the terminology that you already stated, how can we strategize? That's the point that we need to take on to try to turn this thing around. And of course, we know that voting is important, but as you stated, the education piece is just as important. Particularly, we have to do something to turn this around by November 22.
We really do.
2022. That's going to be the critical point. If we go forward with this and trying to turn it around, we got to strategize between now and November.
No, I agree with that 100%, Brother Anderson. Well articulated, well said, well stated. You're right on point with all of that. What I will say is throughout the state of Texas, there's a movement afoot to create that strategy. And I'll communicate through Brother Harris some of those channels, and there's just meetings that we have to be in, right? If they don't see us, then they're going to continue to do what they're doing. But there's Black folk organizing, Latino folk organizing, Asian folk organizing, and white people organizing to really make sure that we're teaching our kids the truth about American history. We just have to, here's the fact, we're 2.5 years behind, and this is a multi-million-dollar effort. And much of that effort is funded out of Texas. So we don't have as much money. We are short on time. So we have to do what our communities do, and that is organize, and that's to advocate, and that's to really, really get busy. But great question. Sister Sharon and Donna both had their hands up. Sharon, go ahead.
Hi, it's first time meeting you. I work with doctoral students, and of course, most of my Black students and a couple of my white students are using critical race theory in their dissertations.
Right.
And so, we have this discussion, through forums like this, through Starbucks discussions. And I was late coming in, but these politicians, these Republicans, they're playing the long game. They're playing a severe long game. And the long game is to remove Black History Month out of the school systems. That's just the bottom line.
Right.
We've already seen evidence in some Texas curriculum where it's not slaves, they're indentured servants. They are happy.
They're immigrants.
They're immigrants.
Farmers.
So the language is changing to where it's stacking confusion on top of what we as parents and as teachers may be telling our Black children. So I'm glad to see that this forum is being continued, because I get very disappointed in our Black politicians who are saying CRT should not be taught in schools, and because we already have history. So I think that there's an awakening in the community, in the nation, because if Black History Month can be removed from the schools, then you got Cinco de Mayo, or any type of Latino history will be removed from the school. And interesting enough, Governor DeSantis signed a bill authorizing curriculum designed to discuss the survival victims of communists. That's kind of like, we can't talk about slavery. but we can talk about communism.
Wow. Okay. Good God.
So it's an interesting piece, and and again, it critical race theory to me is a spotlight on procedures and practices, but nonetheless, it's being used as a is used as a means to remove Black History Month out of schools.
Because the name by itself, critical race theory, to a person who has not heard that term, it sounds like a scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a person online asked the question, why does divisiveness in the media work so well with critical race theory conversation? And part of the reason is the reality is America is a racially fractured society. So anytime you can find a topic that runs along those racial fault lines, you can stir up a lot of energy. And unfortunately, the politician who mastered that was Donald Trump. And he played on the racial fault lines of America. And he taught a generation of politicians how to do that. And this critical race theory debate is just simply following that strategy that was laid out, that was unfortunately successful for him. And so this is why anything that runs along the racial fault lines in America, it will become a politically divisive issue, even in the media. Sister Donna, you had a question. Brother Ernest, you sent me a question I think is pertinent. You asked about what can be done to ensure that these truths in our history are not lost, given the efforts to try to remove them. Now, there's massive efforts in place within our state to ensure that our history is protected. Texas is the only state that I know of that has legalized Hispanic or Mexican American education, Black education, Indigenous education, and a missing one, Asian American education to be taught in our local schools. So we have this legal cover unlike any other state. And while we're getting this anti-diversity equity movement, we also are having this equity push within the state too, because our state is very diverse. And technically, the minorities outweigh the whites is not even close, right? So this is why we're seeing this tussle happening in Texas. Right now, as we're speaking, the state is redesigning the social studies curriculum. And there's a movement across the entire state among people of color and white people who support the work to join these different committees that are looking at the state standards in social studies and history right now as we speak. So the movement is already afoot to protect our culture as it's being taught in our public school system, but it's being contested as well. So any help that any one of us can provide and get involved with this, I think would be great. Texas A&M University, Prairie View A&M University, Texas A&M San Antonio, and Texas A&M Commerce, and some folk at UT have all come together to form an organization called Black Star. Black Star's sole purpose is to research why it's so important to have ethnic studies courses in our state and to prove that these courses have positive impacts on our children culturally, socially, emotionally, academically, using the highest level of statistics as well as our qualitative stories from our communities. We know that Dallas ISD is going to be an integral partner with us in that work. So there's all of these great things happening within our state right now. We just need the energy from everybody to just jump in and help where you can. It doesn't matter what degree you have, how many kids you have, if you're a grandparent or great grandparent, whatever energy, wisdom, and enthusiasm you have, we all need it right now. Because right now is the time we can make a difference in our state. And honestly, so goes Texas, so goes the country. Sister Donna.
Okay, so I apologize, I was coming through the garage and lost the sound. So you mentioned something about the boogeyman, right?
Yeah.
And the reason CRT, or one of the reasons I think CRT became the boogeyman per se, is when all of the killings were going on of young Black males particularly, and schools kind of stopped teaching their curriculum and started teaching about justice and different things within the schools. And so, and there was some attachment, of course, to, discontinuing funding from the police for the police and so forth. And so that's how all of that got lumped in together. So the second level or tier is for the professors, because it's at the higher level. So now what they're trying to do, because professors are speaking out about CRT, that it's not taught in K through 12, et cetera, now they're doing a movement to take away tenure from professors. So can you address that when you have a moment?
Well, all I gotta say, if they want to come after tenure, good luck with that idea. Because in order to get tenure, you have to take away academic freedom. In order to attack academic freedom, 98% of all professors are white. Good luck with that. That's not going to go anywhere. So they're going to have to try to find another way to attack professors in higher education, because the way the lieutenant governor originally did it, he made an enemy of every professor. But that's good luck with that. It's not going to work. But I don't want to say any more about strategies that they should use. But I do know the strategies they initially tried to use just did not work. And it basically unified the faculty, because you want to attack tenure, which faculty members love, and you want to attack academic freedom, which makes the academy possible. He just basically made an enemy of almost every faculty in the state overnight. So they're going to have to rethink that strategy, but they will come back again. In the chat, everyone, Robin's email is there. She's a Fox News reporter. The sister has some really good work. Reach out to her, support her, just send her some love. Let her know we're supporting her, because she's doing it. Fox is a conservative station, but she's not doing conservative content. So please support her.
Dr. James, I have another question for you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
In reference to what you reflected in terms of your networking, is it just primarily networking with peer schools in the A&M system, or are you reaching out to other organizations outside of the A&M system? Because there are several other organizations that have been very instrumental in providing input to the state to turn this back around in terms of what is reflected in our history books and what has been proposed for the curricular subjects in the public school system. Do you plan to connect with those organizations?
We are. So Black Star contains many of those organizations already. Y'all Google IDRA. IDRA, and you have to put it in capitals. When you Google it, it's the Intercultural Diversity Research Association. They've been on the front line since the Civil Rights Movement. They are headquartered in Texas. So there's any number of really great organizations that are doing a lot of work. There's the Ethnic Studies Council, which consists of folk all over the state fighting for ethnic studies. There's so many different organizations out there fighting for justice on behalf of communities. And so if you truly understand the work, you cannot isolate yourself within one set of entities, right? So, I try to make an effort to interface with several organizations. And my goal is to continue to grow my network and continue to partner with folk as much as we possibly can. Because if you truly understand the complexity of what we're up against, no one person or one organization can solve it alone, right? We're doing some work. We're going to be doing more work in the local communities with more churches to get more churches engaged as well. So it's just the work. We just have to keep fighting, and we can't take on kind of this Eurocentric mindset of individualism. Like individually, we're going to solve the problem. No, collectively, we have made a difference through collective resistance. That's one of Dr. King's primary philosophies is it takes all of us to make a difference.
If I may, I do know these two organizations have been heavily involved with the process, and that's the NAACP.
Yes,
at the
definitely.
State level,
Definitely.
and the Texas Alliance of Black School Educators.
Definitely.
And I didn't know if you have been in contact or have any connectivity with them,
Yes,
but
indeed.
they've been pushing that button and that charge to turn to reverse this conservatism that it's very prevalent. So thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. And everybody just write down all this stuff, like, and just start emailing people, and they will more than welcome to help. I see some of our colleagues from different states, Robert Simmons and Kelly Marita. Good to see our brothers. So one of the things, we'll wrap up with a quick conversation about what parents can do, because y'all, here's something that there's a new seed of racism in our country right now. And it resulted from the convergence, the coming together of two pandemics, the pandemics of racism and the COVID-19 pandemic. And for the first time, I think in our country, we saw this next generation really begin to suffer the ill effects of both pandemics. Because if y'all recall, our teenagers were 73% of African-American teenagers were at home during COVID, at home school during COVID. Simultaneously, the next wave of Black Lives Matter was happening in response to Breonna Taylor, in response to, just the deaths of Black and brown bodies during that time period. There were protests throughout the country. They seen a Black man be killed right in front of their eyes. And we're now starting to measure the impact that COVID and racism has had on our Black teenagers. And you all, it is absolutely alarming. Black kids suicide in 2020 was measured 50% higher among Black teenagers since the past 10 years. Which means it's increased by 50% over the last 10 years. The CDC this year issued a report that most people ignored. What they found, I'm presenting some of the data here on the screen. They surveyed teenagers in American high schools in 2021, and they wanted to understand the mental health of these kids from their own perspectives. And the data was so alarming, particularly among Black children. The CDC measured 5 areas of mental health. Black children had the highest levels of poor mental health in 4 out of 5 categories. The 5th category was attempted suicide, and they're up 50% in that category. So let me show you a couple examples. Stress, anxiety, depression in the last 30 days. 25% of Black children reported feeling that in the last 30 days. 39%, almost 40% of our children felt sad or hopeless persistently. That is quite often. 49%. And then 16.2% seriously considered suicide. Seriously considered suicide. Here's another issue. This is predominantly impacting our young Black girls. Their numbers are off the chart. And right now, we're not really paying attention to, because most of us don't know what has happened or what's happening with our young people. We're just seeing them act a little bit different. So one of the things the CDC determined is that of those 5 categories, signs of poor mental health, if kids feel close and connected with people in their school, all 5 of those start to go down. If they feel less connected with people in school, those numbers go up. White children, highest levels of connectedness at school, highest levels of connectedness online, lowest levels of mental issues across the board. Black children, lowest levels of connectedness at school, highest levels of mental health issues across the board. Last week, my daughter came home, middle school. I have 3 kids. One middle school kid, Maya, came home and was like, Dad, a white girl is using the N-word on the bus and caused a lot of ruckus on the bus, and a number of other stuff that I don't want to say publicly. This was the 8th incident that my daughter has experienced at her school since Black History Month. Met with the principal a couple days ago, sent a long letter to the school board, organizing. And part of what's happening is since Black History Month, during Black History Month, kids in her school started calling Black kids cotton pickers and monkeys. My daughter told me 2 weeks ago, a kid walked up to her, called her a monkey twice. The teachers are hearing this, but not actually dealing with it. And what's happening is, what the research is showing is that the more diverse a school is, the more racial incidents that are happening at the school, and the higher the disciplinary issues, because Black kids are reacting to it. And schools are not, because they don't have them recorded, the kids are not recorded saying a racial slur. They can only act on the physical or the other verbal attack that they witnessed by a student of color. So we get higher levels of discipline, and kids are feeling less welcomed at school, which is then causing more of this mental anguish that's happening among our children. This is important for this conversation around critical race theory, because this is what critical race theory is for. It's designed to help us analyze situations we don't know about. It's designed to help us understand how racism might be serving as a seed to a new type of racism that our kids are experiencing. And Brother Harris and I, we talked the other day about some strategies as a people that we need to start considering if we're going to help support our kids and help create these welcoming environments that are free of racial slurs. And I was talking to the principal. The principal said to me, I said, it's not acceptable that kids are calling children cotton pickers and monkeys in school. He said, you know what, sir, I have not heard the kids use the term cotton pickers, but we do hear them saying monkey. And I'm sitting there saying, waiting for the follow-up, like, okay, so what did you do? That's not normal for children to walk around calling Black kids monkeys. And so here's where I'm sitting with this is an issue where our children's lives are at stake. And this is yet another issue that we need to organize ourselves around, because we may lose the critical race theory fight, but this is a fight we can't afford to lose. We cannot afford to have schools that don't know what to do when Black children are experiencing racial slurs and the staff don't have proper training on how to support them and how to end that from happening at their school. Thoughts from you all?
It's me again. I know you're probably on top of this as well, but there is a push now to remove social emotional learning training in schools, which is highly, highly, highly needed in schools especially the diverse schools. We're seeing it where they're talking about we don't need to have a social emotional learning or SEL in math courses. So I had to ask somebody, I said, send me a problem that they think has critical race theory, and I need another one where they think is social emotional learning. And basically, how do you feel today? Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's basically what the kids are, we're asking the kids. So I think that as Black parents, we have to be aware of the latest trends that are happening in terms of specialized training. And a lot of parents don't understand that social emotional learning needs to be in schools, Also, as parents, and I will say this, it is important that if you have heartburn about an issue, not one, not two, but several of us or several of you need to go to the board meetings and tag team on the citizens, what they call it, the citizens awareness piece, where you have 3 minutes or 5 minutes to speak, and just tag team your issue just in front of the board. Because there's been several times where I have asked members of the community to go with me to the school board just to talk. And I said, I need at least 6 of us to go, and just like, whatever it was, 4 minutes, 5 minutes a piece, that is 30 minutes. We're just tag teaming. So you have to go to the school board. You have to let them know that you want changes. They can't address your situation at the board, but you have to go to those board meetings and let them know.
Yeah, that's on the schedule. And also in order for you to trigger a civil rights response, you have to also submit a concern in writing to all the proper parties involved, right? So this past couple of weeks have been about doing all that work, submitting everything in writing, allowing people time to respond. Next phase is speaking to the school board, gathering folk, and going to the school board. But at the same time, there's a lot of work that needs to happen behind the scenes in different communities. Like one of the things that we don't know how prevalent racial slurs are in schools. And without that information, critical race theory tells us that racism is permanent in the country. That means it's going to resist. It's like COVID. It's just going to mutate, right? So the idea that we could just bring a concern to a body of politicians and they're going to respond to us in any affirmative way at all, we know that that's not going to happen, right? So we have to have a multi-tiered plan to respond to these issues community by community. But at the same time, we're starting to have conversations now about doing a survey of our own children so that we can hear from them. Because critical race theory says, counter storytelling says that our experiences are most important when trying to solve racism. So if we don't know what our children are experiencing, and if we can't put hard numbers to it, then we diminish our ability to advocate for them. So one of the things we're in the process of planning now, I designed a survey back in January, and we gave it out to 2 schools, a middle school and a high school, that was having problems with the N-word being used. And we need to understand, before we went into the school to do work, we need to understand, well, exactly how it's being used, how often it's being used, why it's being used, who's using it, how are kids responding, all that. And the data gave us a lot of really good information that we were then able to use to go and help the teachers, help the kids. But I think statewide, for us to really raise this as a policy issue, we got to have data behind it. Because they're just going to simply say kids are not telling the truth. Right? So, but that's what critical race theory is. It's a tool to end racism. It helps us to end racism because it shapes how you think about research, right? And the research is important because that gives us a critical point in the conversation, right? It's hard to dispute data.
And I think it also undergirds why the system has to be changed. because when you see how a corrupt system ends up passing upon a toxic behavior and attitude, then people can look at that data and then determine that there needs to be a change that happens from that data as well.
Sorry, Dr. Pastor Ogletree. Can you repeat that again?
I was saying that when you look at critical race theory, one of the other things that it does is, by its nature, it studies how a corrupt system kind of promotes racism down and how it has a negative effect upon future generations. So if they can get us to stop looking at it, then the study of how a system as a whole can corrupt the future generations won't be there. So it's really important that we address it.
That's right. People perish for the lack of knowledge, right? I agree with that. We have a couple comments on the board here. There's a question about kind of racial slurs or verbal abuse, a lot of which is different from physical abuse. How do kids defend themselves? We had another question about what should parents be talking to children about? Let's deal with the second one about what parents can do. And as a parent of 3 Black kids, here's what I will advise. And we can all discuss this because we all have some expertise at this, having parented or co-parented or surrogate parented other young people. But here's what I would say. First, instruct your kids not to respond to a verbal assault with a physical altercation. I know that's hard, but the only thing the system is going to do is punish their physical response. That's all they're going to do, right? And they're not going to have any recourse because the school will respond to a physical assault before they respond to a verbal assault every single time, particularly if it's a Black or brown body involved with the physical assault. There are examples that I know from around the state that make me say that statement, that Black kids have been suspended when a white kid called the N-word right in front of them, directed it right at them. They responded physically, they get suspended, white kid, nothing happens. So number one, make sure that they know not to respond physically. Number two, because kids walk around with these handy dandy cell phones, record it. And if they can't record it video or audio, when the situation is done, write down what they remember, who, what, when, where. They have to be very specific. And then thirdly, immediately, as parents, we have to create the environment where the kids feel comfortable enough to come to us and say, this is what happened to me, right? So the next thing is encourage your kids always. This is a line I literally have used for all 3 of my kids. If you run into a problem at school, it's my problem. So always come home and tell me, right? And I've always said to them, you'll never get in trouble with me if you're being honest with me. And I don't even care if you were in the wrong. My goal as your parent is to always protect you, even from yourself when need be. So please be honest and tell me the truth. So those 3 things are things I think the kids should do, because it's not their responsibility to fix this. This is on us to fix it, right? And I think the third thing, or the fourth thing, is to encourage the kids to advocate for clubs and organizations within their school that is specifically designed to support African Americans on campus. So those 4 things, what do y'all think? What can kids do to protect themselves? What should parents be saying to kids?
If I may, those 4 points were very good for the students. But I think there's another point in relationship to what should parents do. Well, first of all, we got to realize that a lot of our kids are coming from single parents' home, particularly those schools that are located in predominantly Black neighborhoods, if you will. some of the parents just don't know how to handle these situations, and they need to be educated in terms of how to work and get in. First of all, they need to get involved with their schools. Most of our parents don't get involved with the PTA. They don't get involved with the schools. So they don't know how to handle the problem. So that's another point we really have to focus in on, is educating our parents as best we can.
Yeah, I agree with that.
If the parents don't know, definitely the students can't learn at home and get the proper direction, as you just indicated with those 4 particular points of interest. So some kind of way we got to get into the homes. And I have these flashbacks to the old movie, Lean on Me.
Yeah.
How he got involved in the community with the parents to help turn things around at their schools. Now, when you have African Americans and living in the affluent communities, the parents just can't take things for granted. Just because you live in a white neighborhood, there's no racism.
Yeah, brother, you have to slow down right there, because you want it right there. Slow down right there. No, keep going though, but you got to slow down. You're moving a little bit too fast.
Well, it's just an observation I've had in dealing with 25 years of public education in 2 of the largest districts in San Antonio.
That's right.
So this is definitely speaking from experience, and I just wanted to just interject that real quick before this old man forgets it.
Another nugget of wisdom there. But I mean, Brother Anson, he speaks the truth. Unfortunately, financial stability is like an opiate. It can sometimes numb us to the realities of racism. And as a result, we try to move our kids to the right neighborhood, send them to the right school, teaching them the right values. But the reality is there's still Black and brown in this country. And if we have to deal with racism on a daily basis, racism, according to critical race theory, racism is permanent. There's a permanence to it. They have to deal with it too. And I think, even in my mind, I think about all the things I prepared the kids to deal with. And I had more of these conversations with my son, who's 19. I mean, we've had to talk like a million times. And so this has been drilled into his head, mostly because of, George Floyd happened when he was 18, and he would, that day he had to leave to go to work. And we're like, we live 15 minutes from where Sandra Berlin happened, so we had to have a conversation with him, but that's like a daily thing with my son. With my daughters, I think we didn't have those type of straightforward conversations. I must admit that. I'm not certain if it was privilege or was it just not having the same level of fear for them as you have for a young Black male. But I do know we need quite a bit of parent education. We really, really do need that. And organizations like the 100, they do a lot of great work. It's on us to keep pushing these type of experiences, and then getting these type of experiences from here out to the public as well.
One of the things that I wanted to say was that my understanding, according to one of my mentees, that some money was set aside for school districts to develop programs to help Black students. Now, I'm sure it got into a lot of the districts, but we don't hear about any special programs being set up with this money. And one of the programs that we need to really push for is having African American parent networking groups at the schools.
Mm-hmm.
They really need that because based on a study that one of my mentees did, and it was a qualitative study, the biggest concern was that they did not feel welcome. They did not feel welcome on the campus, but they're thriving a little bit better now. But I remember when I was in the San Antonio School District, we also had they had like community liaisons in the communities, and those need to be back in a lot of schools so they know how to work with these different groups. But that African American parent networking group established, especially in schools where you have a high population of African American students, it needs to be there. And then the other thing, and I'll let you go, we need to start examining as parents. I'm taking the parent piece, but I'm also, but the researchers in there also, we need to be asking the question, how many Black administrators and teachers are in the district? Now I pulled a fast one on North Side. I did pull the report. I said, you got all these schools, but you only have onesies and twosies.
That's right.
That's right. Onesies and twosies, but that's only like in 40% of the schools, and the other 60, there were zero, but they had Black student population. So we need to be adamant that if we're going to have Black kids in the school, there got to be at least one Black face, on the campus, if two, if possible, and administrators. But we just need to, again, I go back to the school board. You need to start wearing down the school board meetings as parents.
So Sister Sharon, I think you responded to one of Ernest's questions because he talked about how do we kind of get our voices heard when we're not in those spaces. And like, I don't know, for example, we're here on this group and we represent a very diverse group of folk in the state. Why can't we commit to starting a statewide Black parent organization? And I nominate you as chair.
But okay. I'm sorry, guys. I got to bring this up. Now, I have some heartburns with the churches, okay?
Sure,
and my daddy was a minister, okay?
Uh-huh.
Now, I really think we got to go old school on this, okay? That we need to get the churches to open up those fellowship halls, and we start organizing back in the church. The church has to be the foundation of a lot of this stuff as well. My living room going to hold so many people, but we got to get. I think if you ever have another meeting, we got to get the CCSA to attend this function.
No doubt. No, I'm there 100% with you.
So we can talk later. I could come to Texas A&M. We can go to lunch and just talk all we want.
Yeah, that'd be great. But this is where I'm at with it, y'all. I think we're at a place now where our kids are at such a dire situation that if any of us got anything within us to make a difference, now is the time to do it, right? And so I'm on board with whatever we have to do. And I believe, again, the difference, I think one of the interesting things is the Black church has always been the center of civil rights activity in our country. The last movement, the Black church, and particularly with the Black Lives Matter movement, has been somewhat decentered. And I think that has some consequences for us trying to maintain and sustain the community change work, because if you don't have actual institutions within the systems of communities, it's hard to maintain and sustain that work. But I think knowing quite a few pastors, I believe that they will be on board with doing whatever is necessary to support the children and support the community. I believe that 100%. But I do believe that we need to just decide there's some structures that we need for Black children to thrive and start creating those structures. That's just where I'm at with it. Well, y'all, that's all I have to discuss. I appreciate everyone chiming in and the open and honest discussion, and hopefully through the 100, we can continue to have these conversations, but more importantly, do some follow-up work across these different communities. And however I can be a resource, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is on this screen here. Please follow up with me. And I appreciate the invitation yet again by the 100. I appreciate your time and your input. And let's just keep our children in prayer and keep our leaders in prayer. And let's just do the best we can on behalf of our children. Thank you for your time.
Dr. James, that was an amazing discussion. And, you know, before I let you go, can you just give us a quick overview again of what critical race theory is?
Critical race theory is just a set of ideas to help us make sense of how race and racism is negatively impacting the lives of people of color, and then to propose solutions to end oppression in our country. That's what it is. It's a set of ideas, and those ideas guide the way we think and analyze race and racism, but it also affects how we propose solutions. And what we did low key right here, right now on this call is we all participated in a critical race analysis of Black youth and the appropriate community response to those needs. We all just use critical race theory right here, right now.
Powerful, powerful discussion. To our audience, the folks that are out there that may not have had a chance to comment or ask a question, any last comments or questions before we let everyone go this evening and enjoy the rest of their evening? Well, again, Dr. James, we really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. You know, you've been running full throttle, dealing with family issues and things like that. So we are extremely grateful that you took the time and come to increase our IQ tonight and give us a better perspective of what critical race theory is and what it is not. You know, I would challenge each person that's listening tonight and that's on this call. You know, the bedrock of we is I. Right? And so you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? It's easy to get out there and talk about we should be doing this, we should be doing that, but it starts with a group of eyes coming together and making things happen. So let's take the charge. Let's take Dr. James' call. Let's make some things happen. 100 Black men are here. We're here. I know Dr. Anderson is doing some great things out there. Other folks on this call. Dr. Chadwell is doing some great things. Top Lady, whole lot of folks on this call are doing some great things. So let's figure out a way to kind of merge some of that work. Strength is in numbers, you know. So how can we come together, bridge our ideas, and just become a powerhouse, power force around Texas? Let's make it happen. But again, on behalf of 100 Black Men of San Antonio, Conversations with the 100, we bid you all a good night. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Get some dinner. Kiss the kids. Kiss the significant other, and have a great evening.
All right. Thank you guys for hosting. Great job.